Did anything inspire you to write your new book?
So the new book, I wrote it because I feel like Just Keep Buying is a great philosophy for most people. Kind of want a different perspective or want to look at things differently and understand wealth building more holistically and like a bigger picture. That's what the wealth ladder is for. The question is like, does money buy happiness? And I looked at the studies on this. If you're already happy, more money will bring more happiness, right? But if you're not poor and you're not happy, more money is not going to do a thing.
What does wealth actually mean?
There's a lot of people that can live life on their own terms. That doesn't mean you have to be financially free. Like you can say, hey, my terms are, I'm going to have this job. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to do this stuff. But on the weekends, I get to go and do this other thing that I really like. And it doesn't pay me anything, but I just really enjoy it. And for me, that is wealth. Having the ability to go and do stuff you care about is wealth.
皆さん、こんにちは。ファンドアナリストの篠田尚子です。本日はザ・ウェルスラダー富の階段の著者ニック・マジューリさんにインタビューを行います。ニックさんといえば前作、Just Keep Buying の刊行後に東京のピボットのスタジオでインタビューをさせていただきまして、そこから約1年経ち、マーケットの環境も変わった中、この新刊が発表されまして、私も英語版と日本語版それぞれ読み、とても良い意味で裏切られた本になりました。Just Keep Buying はもう本当にタイトル通りですね、しっかりとこの、富を作っていくためのルールというのを分かりやすくデータに基づいて解説をされていた、そんなところが多くの方に印象に残ったんではないかなと思うんですが、ウェルスラダーに関しては非常にその精神面なども含めて俯瞰してやはり、お金、富、またその本当の幸せって何なのかみたいなことを見られる、内容、きっかけにもなったなというふうに思っています。またニックさんご自身は、2024年に、来日もされていて、その時にインタビューをさせていただいてますので、改めて日本で受けた印象なんかもたっぷりお聞きしたいなと思っています。Thank you so much for joining us today. In Japan, Just Keep Buying has actually been read even more widely than in the US. And I heard that there are more than 200,000 copies sold in Japan. And I really think that many readers in Japan here follow the ideas of your book very seriously. So today I'd love to talk about your new book, The Wealth Ladder, not just as a follow-up, but as a slightly different perspective. So I want to go beyond investing and to talk about work, spending, and also happiness as well. So you visited in Japan in 2024 on a personal trip. And although this time we're online, I love to keep that experience in mind as we talk, especially in terms of how Japanese readers might approach this book. So to start, and before I dig into the details of your latest book, can I ask you how you feel about Just Keep Buying being so widely read in Japan?
I love it, and I'm obviously very grateful. I did not know that this would happen, that it would take off in such a way, and the Japanese readers would love it so much. And it's been a pleasant surprise, and it's even better because obviously after my wife and I visited, she really loved the country, and she can't wait
Oh,
to go
great.
back. And she's always, I mean, she's pregnant now, so we're not really traveling much, but she is telling me all the time, we have to go back. I'd go back again before I'd even go to a bunch of new countries. I'm like, okay, so we do have a plan to go back at some point, and we're very excited to go back at some point. So it's been a lot of fun.
Oh, great, great. Did anything inspire you to write your new book?
So the new book, I wrote it because I feel like Just Keep Buying is a great philosophy for most
Mm-hmm.
people and for like people in, most stages of their financial life. But I
Right.
realized that certain people who are just starting out, it's not the right philosophy yet. And then for people who want like really extreme wealth, like,
Mm-hmm.
absolute, what I say in the US is like over 10 million US dollars, which is a lot of money. Anyone
Wow.
that's trying to get to that level of wealth, they need to go beyond Just Keep Buying. And so
Mm-hmm.
it applies to, a lot of different people, and it's a good framework you can keep coming back to, which is why I like it.
Right.
So like just keep buying is one of the strategies on the
Uh-huh.
ladder. And so I basically said, hey, let's zoom out and look at other possible strategies. So that was the idea behind it. I wanted to come up with a new framework that people could come back to. I still think just keep buying is the perfect like starter book or helps most
Hmm.
people. But for those people who kind of want a different perspective or want to look at things differently and understand wealth building more holistically and like a bigger picture, that's
Right,
what the wealth
right.
ladder's for.
Oh, I see. So let's deep dive into the details of the wealth ladder. So what problem actually is the wealth ladder trying to solve? And you describe each level using the price of a decision and the 0.01% rule. What was your
Mhm.
intention behind explaining the ladder in this way?
I think the idea with the ladder was I wanted to use it as a framework and then
Mhm.
have it help you solve your income,
Right.
spending, and investment choices, right? Help you with those choices, right? And so
Hmm.
the idea here was, the analogy I used in the introduction was a fitness instructor would give different advice to someone who's morbidly obese versus a well-trained
Right.
athlete. Like the diet and exercise advice will a lot of the principles will be the same, but the
Mhm.
specific strategy you follow is going to change based on where you
Right.
are. And I think you can take that analogy and you can apply it directly
Hmm.
to how you use your money, your wealth building, all that type of stuff. And so that's kind of where I came from when I was writing this. And in
Hmm.
terms of like the spending piece, which you're talking about, the 0.01% rule, I think
Right.
the reason why I have all these rules, I had, rules for just keep buying. I have rules in the wealth ladders because,
Hmm.
these rules work very well. And you don't have to follow all of them. I'm just throwing them as options. And you're like, oh, I like that one. Use it. If you don't like it, don't use it. Right. So I want to give people options and different ways of viewing their money so that they can
Mm.
make better choices. That's ultimately what all this is all about. And that's what I was trying to do with the wealth ladder.
I see. So in that sense, like level 5 and level 6 may feel distant for most people, but you say that they're still important for those at lower levels. So does that also mean that you're giving the options, right?
Exactly. I think for level 5 and 6, obviously most people will never get to that wealth and they don't need to live a good life
Right.
whatsoever. But I still think it's useful to think about some of the mistakes that people in level 5 and 6 make, because
Uh-huh.
those same mistakes, overlooking your family, working so much that you don't have a social life or you don't do anything else, right? So it's like there are
Right.
people that make mistakes in level 5s and level 6 that apply
Right.
to people across the wealth ladder. And I wanted to focus on those things. And those
Uh-huh.
people tend to do it because they focus too much on money. And so I was like, hey, what are some of these types of issues and how do they apply to everybody? And so that's kind of what I tried to do in those
Right.
chapters, even though, like, yes, I will probably never get to level 5 or level 6. Most people won't, and that's fine. But it's like, what are the lessons that anyone can use if you're reading
Mm.
this book?
I see. So, how about, regardless of the level, do you think that the successful people share certain mental models or patterns of decision making?
I haven't studied like a bunch of successful people and tried to come up with,
Hmm.
some sort of mental model or decision making. I do think if I had to pick one thing,
Right.
it's consistency. It's just focusing and
Mm.
consistency over a very long period of time. Now,
Mhm.
the problem with that though is like it's very hard to find people who focused on something for a long time and were very unsuccessful, right? Because you would never
Right.
know about them. They don't write headlines about, hey, someone tries to do something for 20 years and fails like miserably. You don't see those headlines, right?
Right.
So because of that, it's kind of hard to know what's actually true and what's not. I do
Hmm.
think though the one thing that does seem to, be somewhat similar across, most successful people is some form of consistency. I also
I
think that's
see.
why Just Keep Buying did so well as a book. It's because it is about instilling that consistency. Like literally just keep buying over time and you can see a lot of progress in your financial life.
And also, early in the book, you suggest choosing work based on three things: what you're good at, what you're interested in, what people will pay for. And I really love this quote. So, could you briefly walk us through this framework?
Yeah, so there's this idea that, how do you choose a job? How do you choose a career? What you're going to do with your
Mm.
life? And I said these three things you can talk about: your strengths, what you're good
Hmm.
at, your interests, kind of what you like are passionate about, what you want to pursue, and then lastly, what people will pay you for. If you have to start somewhere, everyone has to start, unless you have money or assets or a family that can support you or
Hmm.
someone that can support you. Everyone has to start with getting paid first because you need to make some money just to get a financial base. But once you have a financial base covered, like then you can start exploring other options. Or on the side,
Mm,
you can work on your strengths and just focus on the thing you're good at and see what you can do to get yourself interested in it. So if I had to pick, like for most people, it's going to be they're going to just get paid initially. They'll save up some money, and while they're doing that, they can work on their strengths. And then,
mhm.
the compliments and the praise they get from doing something they're good at, they can also start to get interested in it. And I think that's the framework I use in terms of my writing. I used to hate writing. It's very funny as someone
Oh.
wrote two books, and I actually wrote them, right? This was pre-AI. I wrote the first one pre-AI, so I didn't have a computer write it, right? No, nothing like that. But the thing is, I didn't used to like writing, and I started to like it after I started really working on it, and I started
Mm.
getting better at it, and I was decent at it. And it was a lot of the people saying, "Hey, you did a great job here with this article," and that kind of fueled me to keep writing. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from when I, talk about these types of things. And so think about that as like the greater framework, like of those three things, what can you focus on, and then build on those strengths and see where it takes you.
Well, yeah, that's very interesting. Well, you said that you didn't like writing. So, like in the school days, you didn't like writing essays or anything, right? I mean, what
Mhm.
motivated you or to write at first point?
Yeah, so I don't know how writing is taught in Japan to students and to children, but in the United States, it's like, hey, you need to write a 500 word essay
Right,
on this
exactly.
random book you've read,
Right,
right? And so
right.
I had to write a 500 word or 1,000 word essay on the Scarlet Letter, and I'm like, it's not that I didn't like the book, it's nothing like that, but I wasn't passionate about that.
Ah,
So
yeah,
most of
yeah.
the writing that is done for, at least in my experience in the United States,
Uh-huh.
for children is, hey, you need to write about this thing that I gave you, versus, hey, what if I said, why don't you write 1,000 words? Actually, you know what? There's no word limit. Write about anything you want that you're
Mm,
really interested in. Like, what's your favorite thing? Like, write about your favorite cartoon or your favorite, like, you could get kids to write so much
mm,
more if you let them write about what they want to write about. And guess what?
mhm.
I was a kid that never got to write about what I wanted to write about. And then at age of 27, I started writing about what I wanted to write about, which was personal finance. And that's
Right.
kind of how this all started
Mm,
happening. And so I'm not saying that's the solution to all these problems, but I think that's
mhm.
something where you can really start to see a change in someone's behavior based on, how they're implementing it.
Yeah, I strongly agree on that because I have the same experience in my elementary school days that I was forced to write something in the
Mhm.
class, right? Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Uh-huh. And you mentioned about the side jobs as well in the book, and but unfortunately in Japan, not everyone can pursue side jobs due to employment structures and some of the restrictions. So within those limits, what realistic options can people take to climb the ladder?
In the case where you can't do that because your employer's against, I know like more traditional Japanese employers haven't always
Right.
allowed that. I know they've started changing. I think in
Mhm.
2018 they started to change stuff to allow for more side jobs and things like
Exactly.
that. In that case, I guess you have to evaluate, and I understand why they do this. They want you to show loyalty and say, "Hey, I work
Hmm.
long hours," because then you're always going to basically have a job. So the question is like, do you work harder and then try and move up in the company faster? Is that even an
Right.
option? I don't know if is that a path that's available? That's one option. If that's not an option, have you considered getting another job where you could do something on the side? There's a
Right.
lot of things like that. And the other thing is you don't have to have a side hustle. Like you don't have to climb the if you're trying to climb as quickly as possible, you're going to need to find other income streams. But if you can't do a side hustle like through your job and you don't necessarily want to climb the ladder as quickly, then you can just keep your job and just keep doing this. Once
Mm.
again, the ladder is not meant to be climbed all the way to the top. That is not the goal
Right.
of the wealth ladder. Like I
Mm.
presented it as an idea, and I
Hmm.
don't think everyone needs to climb it. I'm not saying you need to get to a certain level to be happy or anything of that sort. It's just more of a framework. And so if you're dissatisfied with your financial life, then we do need to look at some of these things and see what can you do. And if you're like, I can't leave my job, I can't start a side hustle, I have no way of making more income because I'm
Mm.
restricted, then you've taken away any sort of lever we have. The only lever you have left is how you spend money. And I don't like using that lever, but if that's the only lever you have, then you have to change that to kind of get to yourself to a point of more security so that you can maybe consider other options.
In terms of the growth of the human capital versus the financial capital, how would you say that people should decide when to shift toward market investing from the human capital?
Yeah, so I think early on when you're starting out, you always,
Hmm.
most people are like, oh, I should focus on investing. Like, yes, get started. It's always good. But at the end of the day, you're not going to have a lot of money yet. And so
Right.
your portfolio is not going to be throwing off a lot of
Hmm.
returns. So it's not going to be generating a lot of income for you, right? So
Hmm.
where does that shift start to happen? On the wealth ladder, that's going to happen in level three, which in the United States is like 100,000 to $1 million
Hmm.
US dollars. I know in the Japanese version of the wealth ladder, that's it's going to be within yen and whatnot. But like,
Right.
it's a completely different range, and that's where it's
Hmm.
like, hey, by that point, your portfolio is much larger, and that's
Hmm.
really where it's going to start to make a difference in kind of how you do things, right? So that's
Hmm.
where I'm when I think about this, it's like, okay, once you have maybe a few million yen saved up, then it's like, okay, that's a significant amount where I'm like, okay, that's definitely going to make a difference. And so I
Right.
think thinking through where that is, that's where
Hmm.
you're going to start to understand, all the different facets of when investing is the right. And I think you'll know it because your investment portfolio will start to compete with how much you're earning, right? If you're like, oh, wow,
Hmm.
I earn this,
Hmm.
my investment portfolio earned this. Once it starts to get closer, that's the big moment when you know, hey, I need to focus more on investing.
Okay, so it's not just a matter of age, but rather the balance in your portfolio that you're saying.
Yeah, I would say it's more that competition between your
Yes.
earning power and your
Uh-huh.
portfolio's earning power. And when you're starting out, your portfolio is earning basically nothing. And over time, even if your income's still growing, this one should start to grow and it's going to compete with you. And then one day, if you do really well, it'll surpass you, what you can earn.
Right, right. So here I'd like to briefly share what many Japanese investors are feeling right now. Within inflation continuing in Japan and the recent expansion of the NISA program, which is the tax exempt program, many
Hmm.
people feel a strong sense of pressure to start investing, like almost the fear of being left behind if they don't act now. So for people who are approaching investing from this place of anxiety, often without much financial and emotional margin, what kind of mindset would you want to share with them?
I can understand the fear here
Mm.
because, especially in Japan, which for the last few decades, the best one of the best things you could have done was just hold cash because that cash
Exactly.
had very little inflation to even deflation, where so it held its value for so long. So
That's right.
in that environment, you never need to invest, right? Why would you? You can just put it in you
Hmm.
literally leave it under your mattress, as they say,
Right.
and that is just going to, that's going to keep its value and you don't have to worry
Hmm.
about it. In an inflationary environment, it's not true. When inflation's high, that value of those dollars or those yen are going down over time.
Hmm.
And so you're kind of forced to participate to kind of keep that
Right.
purchasing power around. And so I think what's happened, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm feeling pretty good that like Japan has had a kind of a paradigm shift from COVID and everything that's going on, that now
Right.
like
Right.
inflation is here to stay. I'm not saying it's going to stay this high forever, but it seems like inflation is going to stay around, which means the old model is not going to work anymore. And so you have to
Right.
think about investing. You have to think about getting allocated somewhat. What I would say is if you're worried about it, you don't need to put all your money into investments, put it all into the NISA right now. That's not the goal. Start just getting used to putting some money in there. Just get
Mm.
into a habit of putting a little bit and start small. I think the habit is going to be more important than the amount necessarily because you'll start putting some yen in there periodically and you'll start to see it grow. And then if the market's doing well, it'll grow further. If it doesn't, it'll go down a little, but don't be worried about that. It's more about the
Mm.
long-term accumulation. You need to start thinking in multi-decade periods, and that's kind of where you're going to see this. And you don't just want to put it all in one stock or all in one market. You
Right.
want to have it diversified as much as possible, and you're going to start to see that pay off over a long period of time. So for the anxiety, I can't. I don't know what it's like to grow up and live in that environment, but I can
Mm.
tell you from someone who lives in the environment that's very similar to like the current Japanese environment with
Hmm.
normal inflation. It's very regular to invest. It is not it seems scary because you guys haven't done it for so long, but I'm telling you, us in the US have been doing it for over 100 years. It's very normal. Yes, the market can go down. That is a normal
Right.
part of
Right.
this. It's just this is how the game's played in most developed economies.
Hmm.
Japan, you guys had a very, I would say, non-normal period, let's say in the 90s and
Right.
2000s and even to the 2010s a bit, right? So that was not how most asset markets work. So just keep that in mind when you're investing or deciding to invest.
So you mentioned and you emphasize the importance of diversification, but when an asset performs well, people tend to like fall in love with a certain asset and they tend to over concentrate. So how should we manage that temptation?
You have to realize that. I mean, I love looking at these charts that show like over very long periods of time, like
Right.
which, like the rank plots. It shows, hey,
Uh-huh.
this
Yeah, the
asset was
table,
number
right?
one, this is number two, right? And
Uh-huh.
then you can go and see in the next year it changes. And so these kind of asset quilts, as they're
Right.
called, and those plots are very useful, or those charts are very useful because you can see the rankings change. And an asset class that did very well in one period may do very poorly in the
Right.
next. And so, for example, I remember in 2009, 2010, everyone said US stocks are dead. Like they're done. Like international is better. You shouldn't even allocate to the US. US is a
Mm,
mess. And guess what? The US has been one of the best, if not the best performing
hmm.
market since 2010 in the world, right? Or, it's the largest developed one, right? So it's like just because something has a bad period doesn't mean it's always going to have a bad period. People have
Right.
counted out Japan for a long time. And don't get me
Hmm.
wrong, Japan had a very difficult period following the 89 peak.
Hmm.
But look, now the market's up and now we're at new highs
Right.
and the market's doing well. Does that mean it's going to continue forever? No, but it's very easy to discount something for forever, but things change. I mean, the world changes. Things that used to be true are no longer true. Things
Hmm.
change. We don't know the future. How do we counteract that? We diversify. That's the key here.
So how about the market booms like the AI stocks, the cryptos, gold? That happens everywhere. And I think that the riding the wave can work sometimes, but under what condition does it make sense?
If you want to do it, I always say my joke is sin a little, which means just like
Um,
if you're gonna do something like this, just do it a little bit.
right.
Take a few percent of your portfolio and put
Uh-huh.
into something like. But I don't want you to go from betting, taking your portfolio, which is nice and diversified, and then
Right.
selling everything and putting it all into one
Mm,
thing. I mean, if it works, you can get incredibly wealthy doing that. But for a lot of people, it doesn't work, and so you can lose
right.
everything. So those are kind of the trade-offs there, and those are the risks you're taking. I recommend, okay, if you feel like something's going to be a winner, just give it a slight little allocation, slight more boost. If it's 5% of your portfolio, make it 6%, make it 7%. Do something small. So if it does well, you're going to feel
Hmm.
like a winner. And if it doesn't go your way, then you don't feel that bad because you didn't lose as much in the end. So that's my way of doing that. But you need
Hmm.
to come up with a portfolio that is diversified. I think that's the important thing because, diversification is how you retain your wealth over time and how you grow your purchasing
Mm.
power.
Yeah, I strongly agree. Okay, thank you. And I think that the spending also is a very important part of asset building as well. So in Just Keep Buying, you introduced the idea of spending money guilt-free through the 2X rule. I think that was a very memorable way and a good way of to balance spending and investing. So after writing the Wealth Ladder, do you think this rule holds up when it comes to how you should spend money?
The rule is, once again, as I said earlier, there's a lot of different rules I put out there.
Right.
And 2X
Hmm.
rule is one, hey, I want this one particular thing. So if I'm gonna,
Hmm.
spend, a few thousand yen on some piece of jewelry, I need to put a few thousand yen into something else, right? You can think
Right.
of it as like, okay, one for one or something like that, right? And I say the same thing in this case of like, okay, that's one way of looking at it. In the wealth
Hmm.
ladder, I propose the 0.01% rule, which
Right.
is one 10,000th of your
Hmm.
wealth. Take your wealth, divide by 10,000,
Hmm.
and that's how much you can spend on a daily basis and not worry about it. That's what I call a trivial or an
Right.
unimportant amount. It's a
Hmm.
very small amount of money, right? And so I'd say, hey, oh, if it's below 1/10,000th of my wealth, I can spend it without thinking about it. So that's another framework. If you don't
Hmm.
like that one, try the 2X rule. If you don't like the 2X
Mm.
rule, I'm just trying to put things out there that help
Mm.
people. Some people really like the 2X rule. Some people really like the 0.01% rule.
Hmm.
And the 0.01% rule is based on your wealth. The 2X rule is based on just your behavior, really. Like, oh, I want
Mm.
this
I
thing.
see.
Okay, then I need to save double. Then I really need to go above and beyond. But there are different types of rules for different
Hmm.
things. And so when you choose to use one or another, it really depends, right? And I think a lot of people, the 2X rule is more for like a splurge when you go above and beyond. The
Right.
0.01% rule is more for like daily spending. When I'm at the grocery store, do I want to get the nicer thing that costs a little bit more? And right. And so that difference in price, that little marginal amount, is that below, let's say, 0.01% of my wealth? If so, I buy it. If not,
Hmm.
maybe I don't. And so that's the thinking there.
The chapter that you mentioned, I think that this is the ultimate question. So, does money buy happiness? And this really stood out to me. Could you briefly share why you choose this title in the chapter?
I think it's a question that a lot of people ask, and I know that's
Right.
definitely true in the United States, where we're obviously a little bit more money obsessed than many other cultures. But the question is like, does money buy happiness? And I looked at the studies on this, and I said, okay,
Hmm.
ultimately, like, what does all the research find? The research has kind of evolved in the last few years. And
Right.
ultimately, if I had to summarize the research on money and happiness, if you're already happy, more
Hmm.
money will bring more happiness, right?
Right.
If you're poor, if you don't have a lot of money, more money typically brings more happiness.
Hmm.
Okay. But if you're not poor and you're not happy, more money is not going to do a thing. Right. And
Right.
so
Right.
think about what that means, because what it says, most people that, okay, if you don't have anything, having some sort of wealth or some security, that's going to bring happiness. So we know that. Like I don't think anyone is debating that point, right?
Hmm.
It's having some money is better than nothing. I'm not saying you need to be super rich, but you want to have some resources so you can feed yourself, clothe yourself, have shelter, all these basics. Everyone agrees on that. We can even put that aside, right? What the data is really showing is that if you're already a happy person, you love life, everything's going well, more money is going to make you even happier. That's the good part.
Hmm.
That's the good news. The
Right.
problem, I think, shows up is for those people that aren't happy. They're not poor. They don't, it's not like they're in poverty or anything. They're not happy and they think money is the solution. And what the
Mm.
research shows is no, it's not. So
Right.
if you're not poor and you're searching for money as the solution to your problems, it's not the solution. And you need to focus on something else, because that's going to actually make you happy. And then once you're happy, then you can go get more money, because that'll make you even happier, right? So it's very
Right. Right.
ironic that the
Uh-huh.
people who are already happy, more money is going to make them
Uh-huh.
happier, but the people who aren't happy, money is not the solution.
So that brings to the point, to the five elements of the great enhancer, I guess. Yeah, I like that. I really like that part as well, especially the quote you mentioned that negative relationships are like the flu. And that really stood
Mhm.
out to me. So could you share a bit about this idea and how it fits to the great enhancer?
Yeah, so the idea of the great enhancer is like, money is this thing that enhances everything else in your life. By
Hmm.
itself, it's not that useful. And the analogy I use is salt, right? Salt can
Right.
make a dish taste much better, but you would never just eat pure salt, right? Salt by itself
Exactly.
is not that appetizing. And my argument or my analogy is money just by itself, without family, without friends, without health, without time, like,
Mm.
is not useful, right? Just having a bunch of money, but you don't have your health, or you don't have friends, you don't have family, it would be a terrible life. So you kind of need it all together. And money is kind of like the salt of your life, right? That's how
Right.
I envision it in the analogy, right?
Hmm.
And so what you just talked about is like, okay, let's go through the other types of wealth. Like, how does, social wealth impact your
Hmm.
life, your happiness, how you feel? How does physical wealth, which is like, you can think of as your health in many ways, your mental wealth,
Hmm.
all the time off, how much time, free time do you have? How much time do you have to do things you care about? All these types of things impact your life, and money can help with those,
Hmm.
but by itself, money is not going to provide anything, to your life
Right.
besides just some basic level of security, right? After that, then you need those other things to make your life actually worthwhile.
What does wealth actually mean to you? Not just reaching the top of the ladder, but improving the life itself?
The idea is wealth should allow you to build the life that you want and that you desire, right? So it's like, it's
Hmm.
really living life on your own terms, right? Of course,
Right.
that's a very vague definition, but for every person it's going to be different. For some people, they're not going to feel wealthy until they literally have enough resources to retire and never work again. Some people aren't going to feel wealthy unless they have enough resources so they can spend their time how they want with, let's say, their friends and family. Some people won't feel wealthy unless they have the money so they can,
Hmm.
go and invest in their health and maybe join a gym and do all these things. Like, everyone's
Right.
different, right? And so
Hmm.
figuring out what that thing is for you, that's how I define wealth. It's living life on your own terms. There's a lot of people that can live life on their own terms. That doesn't mean you have to be financially free. Like, you
Hmm.
can say, hey, my terms are, I'm going to have this job. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to do this stuff. But on the weekends, I get to go and do this other thing that I really like. And it doesn't
Hmm.
pay me anything, but I just really enjoy it. And for
Right.
me, that is wealth. Having the ability to go and do stuff you care
Mm.
about is wealth. And so a lot of people have more wealth than they think. And I like to emphasize that in the book, and really have you think more holistically. And as I said, bigger
Right.
picture about all this stuff.
So it's not just about money, but you have to have your own perspective to take a look at the wealth that you don't even notice.
Exactly. And so I think that's a lot of things it's easy to overlook. I mean,
Right,
and I think the reason for this is it's measurement, right? It's very easy to measure like
right,
and see a precise number for, oh, here's my net worth, here's my bank account
right.
balance, here's my saving account or checking account balance, here's what's in my NISA account. Like everyone has numbers that are very easy. You can't say, oh, here's my friend account balance. You don't have that, right? You can maybe count how many friends you have, but even then, like one really good friend is more important than 100 just kind of acquaintances, right? So I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of ways in which just looking at just how we measure things
Right.
impacts how we think about wealth. And so it's something to kind of keep in mind. So I push back a little bit and say, hey, think about wealth a little bit bigger picture, because that's what's going to allow you to live your life on your own terms.
Could you share a final message to your Japanese fans, please? I mean, I noticed in the Japanese edition of your book, there's a special or original introduction for the Japanese readers, right? So if you could share any stories behind that, any message to the fans, please?
So when I visited Japan, this was November 2024, so about a year ago,
Right.
I noticed, and obviously this is something that most tourists will notice, like there's a lot of rules in Japan, and the rules aren't written down. It's not like when I landed,
Mm.
someone handed me, oh, by the way, when you're on the escalator in Tokyo, be on the left side, but when you're in
Right.
Osaka, be on the right side. Like
Right.
no one tells you this, right? But it's very
Exactly.
interesting how
Right,
quick and
right.
easy it is to pick up on these rules, and you pick
Mhm.
up on the norms because everyone follows them, and there's no police out there saying you need to follow the rules. People just enforce it themselves, which is very nice. And so you start to understand a little bit more about a society, and rules are very useful in that sense.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize this, but I wrote the just keep buying rules, and I had these like rules for finance. I'm like, I just wrote that because I thought it'd be useful. I didn't realize that, Japan has a lot of these little informal rules, and that probably spoke to a lot of people like, oh, these are
Mm.
interesting. I can just follow rules because rules are like a part of this culture in many ways. And so
Mhm.
while I was there, it was very interesting for me to kind of see that and see the rules. And
Um,
when I was writing this book, I was thinking about, okay, the rules are just the baseline. That's the first way.
mhm.
And it's a very strict thing, which is kind of what I did with Just Keep Buying. I kind of gave a very strict, here's what you do in all these situations. But with the wealth ladder, as I said, I zoom out, I look at the bigger picture, and I say, okay, how
Mhm.
can we adapt these rules based on where you are in your financial life? Are you
Mhm.
level one? Are you level two, et cetera? And so that was a kind of a new concept I was messing with. And I did try to include more Japanese references in the book because I'm like, hey, I didn't realize I had an audience here. And so I feel, obligated to write for this audience and talk about some of their things. Obviously, I can't write everything about it because I don't fully understand the culture. I didn't grow up there. I've spent only a few days there, but I've been, it's been very fun to kind of learn what I have learned. And so when I was writing all this stuff, I was trying to say, okay, how might a Japanese reader think about this particular story or this thing,
Mm.
right? Even as I'm kind of going through and just thinking about these things, which is very useful. But yeah, so I mean, the message to the Japanese, readers is thank you for reading. Arigatou gozaimasu, I would say, and just I truly appreciate everything. And it's been just a pleasant surprise from my end. And I plan to do. I mean, I'm slowly kind of getting the ball rolling, but I plan to do more content in Japan. I plan to do more types of stuff out there
Oh.
eventually,
Uh-huh.
and it's going to take me time, but I really want to do as much as I can to learn more about Japan, learn more about these types of financial issues. I've actually, funny enough, I did a virtual talk which was shown at a conference in Japan. I think it was maybe last month. And
Mhm.
I had to do this whole analysis on the NISA and like, how does the NISA account work? And if you maxed it out, like the new NISA versus the old NISA, and like
Ah,
walking
right.
through all those things. And so I know a little bit about this stuff, but I am,
Mhm.
very interested to talk more about it in the
Oh,
future.
wow.
So I'm mostly grateful. It's just been, everyone's been super nice, and I love Japan, and everything's done for me. So thank you so much.
Very excited to hear that. Thank you
Mhm.
so much again.
Mhm.
And I hope that many of the Japanese readers will become your fan by reading The Wealth Ladder as well. So thank you very much, Nick. And I hope to see you again, hopefully in Tokyo or any parts of Japan next time
Of
physically.
course. Thank
Yes,
you.
of course.
Of
Thank you
course. Yeah, I
so
will
much.
definitely reach out to you guys, and hopefully we can maybe do media in the future. I think that
Oh,
would be very
yeah, yeah,
fun.
sure, sure. Thank you so much. So see you
Yeah.
soon.
Yes. ありがとうございます。
ありがとうございます。Thank you. 本当に細かいお話もいろいろお聞きして、また日本でのお話とかですね、あ、そういうことを考えてらしたんだなとか、とても楽しく、お話をお聞きすることができました。やはりですね、日本でこの本が読まれていること、この富の階段もそうですし、前作の Just Keep Buying も含め、より日本のことを知ろうと、ニックさんがこう努力されているっていうこともよくわかりましたし、その上で特にJust Keep Buying で多くの日本のファンがついたことで、富の階段にもいろいろこう日本のエピソードも入れたりっていうようなこともお聞きできてですね、これからますますまた日本にも興味が湧いたというふうにもおっしゃっていましたし、次の作品にも早くも期待をしてしまいたく、なった次第でした。